Welcome everybody to our live transmission from La Palma Island. I'm sorry we're a little bit late, but at the last location where we were, there was a documentary being filmed and we didn't want to interfere with the work that they are doing there. So we decided to move a little bit further around the corner. And what we see before us is, on the one hand, a spectacular image, of course, very dramatic, but also it is responsible for the destruction of a historic church and houses not far from the location where we are now. Another Canarian historic building lost to the lava flows here in La Palma. We have our interns with us this evening again. Rosie is here, Ben is here, Ryan is here. They have been keeping abreast of developments here throughout the day, and they'll be available to answer your questions and update us a little more about what's been going on. But while everybody joins in this live connection a little bit later than normal, and again apologies, we just wanted to show you some images of the volcano in all its raw power this evening. See if we can get a bit closer for you here. As you see, the situation appears to have developed since we connected yesterday evening, and I'm sure the Geo interns will update us on what's been going on. But if we are all quiet just for a minute or two and just let people hear the dramatic sound this volcano is making, as well as seeing the images. People have used lots of different words to describe this volcano. Some people have described it as majestic, dramatic, terrifying, but we're here to give a bit of context. I think we've been seeing some of the headlines come and go over the last 24 hours or slightly longer that we've been in La Palma. And our mission here, I think, is just to give context around the headlines. On the one hand, to reassure where we feel things are a bit too alarming, but also to inform, so that everybody who is interested in having the latest developments can know what's been happening here, straight from those of us who are here witnessing this event right in front of your eyes. Remember, if you have any questions for the team, just to pop it into the chat. I'll do my best to keep up with them. And just to kick us off, I'm going to ask Ben, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick update, a rundown of what actually are the latest developments here in La Palma in the last 24 hours since we last connected up live. Thank you, Ben.
No problem. Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the live stream from this eruption. So it's been quite a different day for us today, and I think we could start off by considering Rosie's great points that she made yesterday on the live stream about the social impacts and side of things here. Obviously yesterday we were in an area that was very much not affected to a great extent by the current eruption. We were out on news crews, and it was very sort of amazing to see the volcano, obviously. But again, compare that to today, it's very poignant to sort of consider the human side and make sure we don't lose sight of that, because today we've been in an area that was evacuated on Friday. They thought there might be a collapse of the crater that could have sent lava and bombs into this area. Thankfully that has not happened and doesn't look likely to happen. So today the residents here have been allowed to return home. So we have, as we've been walking, as we've been interviewing people, we've seen that, and we've heard, you know, a lot of first-hand, you know, stories of just how sort of terrifying and personally affected, you know, these tragedies can be. So I mean, on the one hand, you know, we are sort of emphasising that this is a very local event to La Palma. I think, you know, in the context of La Palma, I think about 0.3% of the land has been inundated by lava, which obviously isn't much, but you know, even within that, there's such, you know, a broad human impact. Every single person affected by this eruption has a story and has a valid story. So I think it's just really important to consider that, as well as sort of reporting on the main figures. So in terms of the main figures, we've had clear weather today, so there's been a lot of new acquisitions from the satellites, which have helped us to better measure the impacts and measure the unfortunate destruction. So there's a new statistic of 1,314 hectares that have been affected by significant ashfall surrounding the eruption. The lava flows now, well, as of this morning, covered 212 hectares, and as of this morning, a total of 465 houses have been destroyed, along with 17 kilometres worth of roads. Aside from this, the airport that was closed yesterday has managed to reopen. They've had a really big effort there over the last 24 hours to clear all the ash off the runway, and thankfully they haven't had any more further ashfall. So they've managed to clear that, and the flights are now going to and from, which is great. And then, however, the schools, just in the last 2 hours in Santa Cruz de La Palma, have announced that they won't be opening tomorrow, and that is to give people time to clear the ash from the schools and the surrounding areas. In terms of the activity, the volcano, again, it's been fluctuating between, you know, periods of more explosive, more intense activity and periods of sort of less intense activity. The main sort of updates, I guess, was with the new vent that opened lower down the flank that we showed you yesterday, and I think in the duration of our live stream yesterday, that got smothered by pyroclastic material. Well, we showed up this morning to the same locality and found out that vent had re-established itself and was in fact grown, and it grew sort of throughout the morning. However, throughout this afternoon, it then seemed to sort of peter out a little bit, to the point where we couldn't see it with our own eyes. However, I'm sure you can see in the background, just below the main crater, within the last hour or so, the activities got slightly more intense, and this event and that lava flow has re-established itself. On sort of the I guess more policy side of things, you know, there have been these people who've been allowed to return to their homes, you know, which is really good for them in the sense that the sorts of predictions that prompted that evacuation have not come true, and hopefully these people, you know, should now be safe for at least the foreseeable future in these homes from this eruption. But other than that, there was a meeting, a committee meeting today with all the strategic players who sort of monitor the eruption on sort of the science policy interface, and I think Ryan's going to give you some highlights about that in a minute. And as ever, you know, if you have any questions about the eruption or anything any of us says, just pop them in the chat and we'll do our best to get them answered.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you. As you can probably tell, the mood here is a bit more somber even than it was yesterday. I think seeing people evacuated from their homes, being in an area really at the front line and seeing what it means for people, this eruption, over and beyond what it is as a physical display of volcanic activity, has really struck a chord. I think sometimes we forget what the everyday consequence of these things are. And I think it's also been a really intense time since we got here in La Palma a few hours ago, well, yesterday morning. Very intense activity on social media and trying to get the story out of what's been happening here. And I think everybody here is quite tired as well. I think it's a difficult situation to handle sometimes. I think there's a lot of conflicting emotions, lots of things going on, very raw emotions. But at all times we have to try and remember what we're doing here, why we're here, and it's to tell the world exactly what's happening here in La Palma without any sensationalism. We don't have any newspapers to sell. We're not looking to gain followers. We simply want to make sure that the voices of La Palma are heard, and the real science story, the real news about what's actually happening here in the volcano is heard. So if you have any questions, put it in the chat and we'll answer them for you. In the meantime, I think, Ryan, you had a few words to catch us up on. Ryan, over to you.
Yes. Hello. Right. So, starting from what Ben said about the ashfall, the 1,314 hectares, that has now been established as a minimum ashfall because the satellite they use, the Sentinel satellite, can only pick up a thick deposit of ash that's on the ground. So areas where ash is minimal but has fallen is not picked up by the satellite, therefore the figure that they give is only a minimum, and we've seen for ourselves it's very likely that it is actually a lot more than that. And he briefly said about the scientific committee meeting, and here I have a summary of everything that was said. And the first bit is that the eruption will continue to alternate between states of being more explosive and less explosive, which is pretty normal and expected. So there's nothing really to worry about there, and it's nothing that we're not used to. And there are two main lava flows. You should be able to see in the background the one on the north side, which is a lot smaller, and it flows a lot more like a liquid, it's a lot more fluid. And then you have, and this deposit's on top of the old lava flow that was originally established. And then you have the southern lava flow, which is the main bigger lava flow, moves a lot slower and is moving along ground which has not yet been inundated by previous lava flows. The cone that you see in the background is going through different phases. Phases of constructive, where the material is being deposited and it's growing more as a cone and becoming more of that shape that you see online and things. It doesn't happen often, but the shape of the cone that goes up into the center circle. But it also is going through phases of destructive behavior, which is exploding out of the sides and kind of destructing that material, which makes it not that perfect shape that you see. And ashfall because of westerly winds, ashfall is being deposited on the east side of the island as of today. And another monitoring is that deformation is stable, and it has been for the last few days. SO2 levels have been recorded at 25,000 tonnes, but it's important to know that the air quality remains good and is fine, and there is no risk to the population at all. And the final bit is the people of Tacande de Abajo, is it?
Tacande de Abajo,
Yeah.
yes. So
Good
lower
Spanish.
Tacande,
Yeah.
yes.
Tacande de Arriba and I can't say it.
Tazacorte,
No. Tajuya.
T-A-J, Tajuay,
Yeah, that one.
Tajuya.
That one. Spanish is terrible.
We'll
Can
work
return
on that,
to their
Ryan.
homes.
We'll work on that. This is important.
Yeah, can return to their homes after being evacuated 2 days ago. So that was everything, like a summary of the scientific committee meeting that happened. One of the other things, there was a small sort of rockfall and landslide on the western flank of the island, and this is pretty expected with the sort of tremors that you have, but it's small, it doesn't affect anyone. Anything that's said that might suggest that it's linked to the tsunami stuff is wrong. It's got nothing to do with that. And it's, if you go to places in the UK, it's very similar. You see things like that where on the coast, obviously the rock can be quite weak because of coastal erosion and those erosion processes. So when you have small tremors in the ground, it can help weaken that rock, and sometimes you get rock falls that happen, and this was spotted on the western side of the island. And then the last one is about you said that,
yeah.
the skulls and the ash.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's everything with the meeting and about the landslide. So
Ryan, that's great. Thank you very much. That's a really good roundup from here. And actually, just from the non-scientists among us, just to say that it feels a bit different here today. We haven't had the ash flinging into our faces. We haven't had the smells that we had yesterday. But what we have had is these really loud noise that seems to reverberate. I mean, we're staying about 21 kilometers away from here, and the noise of this volcano, perhaps as our expert Alexis was explaining to us over breakfast, because of the lack of wind, we could really hear it pretty much from wherever we were and everywhere we've moved today. So remember, if you want any questions, please, that we can deal with, do pop them in the chat. And there is a question here, if I scroll back. Okay, so somebody's asking, Connor Backhouse, good evening, nice to see you join, nice to see you. That's a really good question, actually, and you would be amazed at how many people in lots of different medias across the world have asked us this exact question. Do we know how long the eruption is going to last? And there have been, people have tried to make a stab at this, and actually the reality is the science isn't good enough to know yet. It's as simple as that. And I think people have tried to compare it to previous eruptions, but I think it's also safe to say that it seems to be a lot more energetic and aggressive than other eruptions they've had in recent memory, with a lot more energy being released. But again, I'm not a scientist, but what I do know is that it appears to be very difficult with any certainty to know exactly how long this is going to last. It could last anywhere between a few weeks to a few months. That seems to be the average of historic eruptions that we have a record of here. But Ben, perhaps you could just give us a little update on that from a non-scientific point of view. That's what I seem to have gathered from previous interviews that we've been asked.
Yeah, so Sharon, you've covered all the main points there for a non-scientist. That was a pretty
Thank you, Ben.
A-star answer.
Thank you.
But yeah, in terms of how long the eruption last Sharon says it's the question everyone wants to know, and the question that is, you know, extremely difficult to answer, because there's the monitoring just isn't good enough. You know, you could measure, say, I don't know, that the ground's deflated. You could interpret that as, you know, magma system draining, you know, and the eruption coming to a close. But you know, there's sort of all manner of things that could, you know, be producing that signal, and who's to say that, you know, a system can deflate and then, you know, reinflate, and yeah, it's just very difficult to predict. I mean, you know, typically these eruptions are weeks to months, but you know, some of them go through phases, like we've seen in the current eruption in Iceland, where it'll, you know, stop erupting for maybe 4 or 5 days and then, you know, restart seemingly for no reason. So you know, so that's another challenge we have with sort of the length of eruptions, is saying for certain when an eruption has actually finished. And there's been a lot of sort of competing arguments, you know, of how to define when an eruption actually finishes. You know, is it, you know, some people have said, oh, it's, you know, if there's been, say, 3 months without any activity. Some people say, you know, totally different things. So yeah, it's a very difficult thing to predict. We just have to wait and see. And you know, most of the time, you know, although we know it's likely to be within weeks or months, anyone sort of predicting a length with sort of a suspicious amount of certainty probably, you know, is going to get it wrong.
That's a really good answer. Thank you for that, Ben. If you could just stay there just for a second, because we have another question from another Connor this time. Hello, Connor. And you are asking, have there been any earthquakes to date of note? That's a really interesting question, because actually last night we did feel a bit of trembling going on under our feet. And in fact, at about 10 o'clock at night, we were sitting in the car and Alexis was being interviewed live with Al Jazeera television, and actually the car just felt like it was going side to side to side to side. Not very violently, but you could certainly feel it. I don't know if you guys, in all the stuff that we've been doing today, have felt anything like that today?
No, I think you know, we feel sort of the ground moving and sort of pulses going through our bodies just sitting here and when we're still and in somewhere quiet. But I think it's mostly you know, sort of the sound waves travelling through the air, and especially, you know, like where we were last night when Alexis was giving the interview, we were, you know, sort of channeled in a street right next to the walls, and we've noticed that you know, when we get close to sort of big flat-sided buildings, the sound really echoes off, and really, you know, you can feel it inside you, sort of rumbling. In terms of earthquakes, sort of the magnitude of the tremor is, you know, is quite low. You know, all sorts of below at magnitude 3. Earthquake and magnitude 3 generally being the strength at which you start to actually feel and percept earthquakes. So I think in the last 24 hours there was maybe a 2.6 and a 2.9 earthquake, but other than that, you know, all the other earthquakes going on have been, yeah, I wouldn't have been able to feel them. But I'm not quite sure on the timing, but maybe the stronger ones in the last 24 hours, maybe they may have sort of been barely perceptible by a few people, or maybe they, you know, could have been a factor in the sort of rockfall we saw earlier on today, or that could have just been sort of cumulative build up of the stresses from all the seismic events we've had. So yeah, lots of earthquakes going on. 2.6 and a 2.9 in the last 24 hours, which are slightly notable, but not really. We'd be talking mostly about notable earthquakes if we had, say, I think a few days ago there was a 3.8 magnitude earthquake, which is thought to be linked to a new vent opening up. So that's the sort of magnitude we'd be looking at for, I guess, a really notable event in the background of all these tremors we've been having.
Ben, that's really interesting. Thank you very much indeed. We've got quite a few questions coming in now, so we'll just take them in turn. Bear with me because it's quite a lot of scrolling involved. And there's another question. Do you know, have there been any new fissures that have opened up?
I'll let Rosie answer this question. Oh no. So no, there's been no new fissures open up. There's still only the one fissure, and within that fissure there's sort of the main vent, which you can see the activity is concentrated on, and I think in there's sort of between two or three eruptive centres. This is kind of variable with time as new ones, crop up and keep on getting filled in, and then we have the lower vent on the flank, which opened up yesterday.
Thank you. Tamsin actually with us. Hello, Tamsin. And she's asking, can we feel the heat from where we are? I'm not sure how far you think we are from the volcano here, but can we feel any heat coming off that volcano?
No, we can't. I'd say we're maybe about 2 kilometres, maybe just a little less.
Maybe a bit more, 3, 2, 3 or something.
Somewhere in that region, kilometres away. But no, we don't feel any heat, and I think, as I said, as a response to this question last night, I think if we could feel the heat, we'd probably be a bit too close to the eruption for comfort. So I think it may be quite reassuring that we can't feel the heat in this scenario.
Yes, quite right. Elaine Rice is with us here. Hello, Elaine. Nice to see you. Rosie has smiled in recognition. Nice to hear you. Watching the news and seeing farmers trying to harvest and protect their crops, what has been the agricultural impact to date? Elaine, that is such an interesting question. And actually, the guys gave us a really interesting figure in terms of the land mass. I think it was 0.3%, correct, of the area of La Palma is actually covered in lava at the moment. The reason we gave that figure and we worked it out this morning was because sometimes on the news you get the impression that this is something that is affecting a larger area, which is not to diminish in any way the impact it's having on the locals who are directly affected. The last figure I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but the last figure I saw was I think 450 houses.
465.
465 now. And the church and the school, and you have to bear in mind that this area that we're talking about is an area that does have a lot of agriculture going on and people depending on agriculture. And in fact, Ignacio, I don't know if you would mind stepping in front of the camera for a minute. I just wanted to have a quick chat about that, because of course the peculiarity about agriculture in the Canary Islands is that you can't just plant bananas or whatever your crop may be. You can't just plant them on top of lava, and on the one hand you think people have lost their crops, that's one thing, but it's more than that. What they have lost is actually all the work that went into preparing this land, and in terms of could we get some light on, Ignacio, please? Sorry, to prepare these lands as well. And Ignacio, it's been an extraordinary labour over many years to prepare these terraces for plantation, because the lava hasn't been there long enough for a natural soil level to develop, so they had to bring soil from elsewhere. And what did that involve?
Indeed. Well, in fact, a big portion of the northern part of the island of Tenerife is basically an artificial landscape. It was originally formed by the different type of lava flows. And you only need about 80 centimeters of soil, normally brought from laurel forest areas or former thermophilus woodlands terrain. So yeah, you only need about a meter to produce, in this case, all sort of crops, but mainly in the Canary Islands, in my opinion, unfortunately, because it's a non-sustainable crop, we are cultivating bananas. So a part of this, obviously, a big water consumption is also involved. But apart from this, you have to prepare the terrain, not only a meter of good soil, but you have to have stone walls, the irrigation infrastructure, as we all know, and possibly foreigners as well. Our water resources are underground sources, so we depend on horizontal tunnels, locally known as water galleries, about 400 wells as well. So in order for us to deal with water, we need electricity. And on this island, electricity is coming directly from oil. So in a way, every time we open the tap, we are consuming oil. So it's a big issue, the water and the electricity on this island. But yes, a big portion of both islands, Tenerife and La Palma, have been previously huge lava fields, nowadays covered by green areas, which in fact are banana plantations.
So in terms of the lava that is coming down at the moment, it's not just the crops that are being lost, but actually the terraces and all the work and the labour that went into preparing them for plantation. Do you think it's likely they will be used again for agriculture, or do you think it's more likely that these areas now, do we know that if they'll become more of a sort of natural park? We don't know.
For sure, it will become a natural park or something similar. It will be protected. This new land, incredibly, will belong to the state, to the government of Madrid. I don't know how much money the locals, the residents of these villages that Ben was saying before, are gonna be getting from the local government or national government. In my opinion, if they get 5% of the value of the terrain, they should be jumping of happiness, because I don't really think that our government, local government or national government, will provide the money that they are promising right now. That is my frank opinion about all that. I still have friends waiting for the money of renewable energy installations that they had previous to the big storm of Delta, which took part in the early about 2006, 2004, I can't remember well.
I'm just going to repeat what Ignacio said, because this is actually really important, and at a time where the world's media and eye is on the Canary Islands, one of the things we want to make incredibly clear is when these things happen, the media descends here, politicians come, honourable people come, everybody has their say, everybody has their selfie, promises money, but that doesn't always materialise. And one of the things that we will be doing in the coming weeks and months is we will be following this story and following the promises that have been made, because a lot has been said here. There's been an outpouring of solidarity, but what we don't want is for the lights to go out and people to forget the real cost of what's been happening here, and the people of La Palma and everything that they've lost. So that's something we'll certainly be following up on here. There's another message here. Thank you for the knowledge. I was not expecting an eruption would be so loud. Yeah, absolutely. I think that surprised all of us, actually. And it certainly seems to be louder than yesterday, would you say, guys? Rosie, do you think it's louder? We're just going to get Rosie in if we could, actually, Ignacio. So Rosie, it certainly seems to be louder today, doesn't it? Ever since we had breakfast this morning, it seemed to be reverberating this incredible sound.
Yeah, and the sound is also something that I just wasn't prepared for, and like when we first heard it yesterday, it was just like words can't describe how that makes you feel, and you know, being this close and hearing that noise. And last night when we were just on the side of the road finally getting something to eat, and as Ben described before, the noise that happens when you get the sound waves that bounce off flat buildings, you know, it literally sounded like we were in a war zone and we were just on the side of the road eating food, and the shutters on the buildings around us were shaking from the noise. And it's incredible, and it makes you think about the power that the earth has, and it makes you it gives you a completely different perspective on, I guess, our relationship to the earth and how powerful it is.
It's humbling, right?
Yeah,
I know we think about this, we talk about it. I mean, we've hiked all of this area with Ignacio, with groups, and us personally, we love this part of La Palma. It's beautiful, and we talk about the volcanoes, and you know, he'll be describing to me what happened, but when you see it in front of you, it's just something else, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you can really understand why, you know, a lot of communities and throughout history, volcanoes have been described using images of hell or using stories of the devil or disgruntled gods. And you can, you know, just sat here with this behind me, you can really understand that, and it's something that I've learned about in my degree and never quite understood it, but seeing that image behind me and hearing it, the noise, the sights, the sounds, the smells, it's just, you can just fully understand why those images are used in order to comprehend that, because I think we're all struggling to, you know, wrap our brains around what's going on.
I think that's absolutely right. And you've actually been speaking to quite a few local people here, recording their stories, their impressions. What have you learned today, Rosie?
I think what I've mainly learned today is I've really learned how to, I guess, the challenge of navigating my own positionality in all of this and where I stand. And I think I speak for all of us today when I say there's been a lot of emotions today,
Yes.
and the atmosphere has just been incredibly emotional, and I think
Yes.
at times that's very difficult to navigate,
Yes.
especially as an outsider trying to navigate that situation. I mean, we were stood 200 meters up the road when we turned around and saw a church in Tudorque that was on fire and has sadly been destroyed by a lava flow.
Yes.
And we were stood up there watching that happen in an area where people are finally able to return to their homes, and you know, emotions are high, and trying to navigate that, and especially by doing my dissertation here and collecting research, it's really difficult to, you know, ask questions in the right way and be sensitive. And I think it's just so important that we remember that you know, every story that I've collected is a different narrative and a different perspective on the eruption. I spoke to a woman who was originally from Florida in the US, who lives in Gran Canaria, who had come over with her husband and was here, and she described how she almost, you know, it was like a tug of war with a decision whether she was going to come, because she didn't want to be an opportunist or, you know, a disaster tourist who was just here to get their photo and leave. And I think kind of understanding why you're here and understanding why you're in a particular location, if it's right for you to be here, is something that's incredibly important for all of us to think about at all times. And I think that's the main thing that I've learned today, and that challenge of navigating how you feel is just...
Rosie, I think you've put it into words absolutely brilliantly, and I think if somebody's here just to gawp, they should go home. I think this is not the time for Instagram selfies. This is not the time to lie by your swimming pool with a volcano in the background. And if we're here doing this work that we are doing, it is because we believe we are trying to do something worthwhile and useful. The stories that Rosie is recording are stories which will now go down on record and will endure. The stories that we are telling via our media channels, the idea is to try and get the correct stories out and to put things into context. And what we certainly don't want to be doing is either sensationalizing. We're not doing this to somehow make ourselves bigger or better or to brand ourselves. This is not about us. It is 100% not about us. This is about being the voice piece for people who right now are going through something quite dramatic and aren't in a position to do it for them. And we want to record that and make sure that that continues, you know, that people know what's happening here. I'm not interested in sensationalist newspaper articles. We just want people to know what people are going through here. Rosie, thank you very much. So other than the American woman, you spoke to some other people today as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I've spoken just to a few different people on the ground. We had to move location because there was a documentary being filmed just up the road, and speaking to the producer. And there was kind of a really interesting conversation going on where we kind of talked about how people who are here to make documentaries and, you know, give the facts, they're here to help, they're here to tell the rest of the world what's actually going on here, whereas there's a lot of journalists who have kind of hopped on a plane, have arrived here, are here to get their story, are here to sell some papers, and then they're going to go home. And, you know, we'll probably forget. Whereas I think, you know, I speak for all of us where I'm never going to forget how I felt today. And as Sharon said before, you know, we want to keep up with the story, we want to keep telling the narratives on the ground, we want to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table when we discuss this eruption, and it's not just the most emotive story that we find. We don't just want to tell that story, we want to tell everyone's story.
That is such a good point. I have to say as well, in defence of some journalists, of course, they do go into terrible situations all over the world and see some awful things. And in a sense, I think it must be a bit like being a doctor sometimes. You must have to sort of become a little bit detached somehow, because otherwise, honestly, I don't know how you do your job day in, day out. I mean, I was trained as a journalist, but I never actually wanted to go into news journalism because, you know, I didn't know that would be the sort of job for me. And I think you do have to be incredibly robust to go into these situations day in, day out and tell the story. I mean, we've been here just over 24 hours, 48 hours, and we're exhausted emotionally, physically, are we not? I mean, it's not just the stories that we're hearing, but logistically it's difficult to do what we're doing. I mean, we've got an Airbnb house which looked fine for what we were doing and a good distance away from the eruption, and it has a sort of death trap 2-kilometre descent that we have to navigate at 2 o'clock in the morning to get home. So it isn't easy, but we're here to give a different, unvarnished version of what's going on and to answer questions as well. So thank you for that, Rosie. So we're now being asked, how high is the magma being sent up? Sorry for the broken English. Not to worry, Clem. It's always good to have your questions. So the honest answer to that is I have absolutely no idea. Ben, would you have an idea of how high? Just bear with us while we change presenters. Here we are. Hello again, Ben.
No, I don't have an idea. We can go on a bit of a guesstimate, really. I do know that it will be within the region of hundreds of meters. The main vent is probably anywhere between sort of 50 and maybe 80 meters high. So going off that, you know, you're looking at maybe sort of 400, 500 meters up for these fountains. So it's really impressive. The sort of height that they go to varies. It's normally at least sort of 100, 200 meters. I know at Mount Etna and sort of some of the exceptional paroxysmal eruptions they've been having earlier this year, fountains gone up to even sort of 1,500, 2,000 meters high. But yeah, we're not going to get that here. I'd say probably 400 to 500 meters is probably the maximum we'll get here.
Thank you. And Elephant 2002 is asking, how is the eruption compared to what it was 24 hours ago? I know you were talking a bit about that at the beginning, but perhaps you could just give us the quick run through of what's different tonight from last night.
Yeah, so the eruption actually is quite in quite a similar phase to what it was this time. This time last night is quite an intense, quite an explosive phase, sort of given the spectrum of the sort of eruptive styles we've seen on show at this eruption. However, it has gone through sort of many phases throughout the day, and I guess the main change, which I already mentioned, was the vent on the lower flank, which we saw open last night. Then during the course of our live stream last night, it was smothered and sort of disappeared when we got back this morning. It had re-established itself, and through the course of the morning got a lot bigger, and there's a lot more sort of aggressive fountaining coming from that. But then during the afternoon, the activity sort of died down ever so slightly. The fountains got a bit lower, and this lower vent shut off for a couple of hours. But now, as you can see, it's active again. So yeah, there's a there's a spectrum of activity styles we get here. It fluctuates quite randomly between different ends, sort of more explosive, sort of ash rich activity like we had sort of towards the end of the week, when the airport was getting really badly impacted by ash, and then on the other side you get sort of less ash rich, sort of less explosive phases where you get more lava and less gas coming out.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ben. And also somebody's asking, I mentioned earlier, we don't have the same smell as yesterday. And what was that smell like? I mean, I'm not a scientist. All I'm giving you is my impression, but maybe it's a wind direction thing that we don't smell the same. But to me, it smelled like a sort of burnt firework, maybe. That was the sensation that I had when we arrived yesterday. Was it the same for you?
Yeah, very slightly, especially, where the sort of ashfall was freshest and greatest. There definitely was a smell. I mean, today, thankfully, the winds are a lot calmer, and the wind direction's favourable, and we're not sort of getting rained on with ash. So yeah, thankfully today there's been less of that.
Yes, we couldn't have sat here yesterday without our goggles and face mask.
No, it would not have been a good idea.
Very comfortable, yeah. Thank you, Ben. Thank you. So thank you for everybody for joining us today. It's been an extraordinary day. I think we're all humbled by just the power and might of this volcano, and we just wanted to share these images and this time with you today. I'm not sure if anybody has any final reflections they want to come and give us. Ryan, how are you feeling? Because actually you're probably heading off tomorrow, are you? Is it tomorrow, the next day?
Yeah. Oh, coming.
So it's been a particularly intense period for you, right? Because you're setting off soon. How are you feeling about heading back, having been here?
The UK's going to be quite boring.
Yes.
That's for sure. Because that is not happening in England.
Sure.
But I mean, there's quite a lot of mixed emotions with the whole thing. Like, I mean, it is like jaw-dropping to see this. Like, I've never seen an eruption before, and like, we have a clear night today. Like yesterday there was a bit of cloud coming in, so it slightly blocked the full spectrum of the eruption, but today, to have a clear night and see it has just been like, it's jaw-dropping. But then at the same time, what Rosie was saying about sort of the atmosphere and everything that's going on, it's also quite hard to sort of comprehend how what it's like for other people, and what is actually really happening to the people here. It's really hard to comprehend and kind of get your head around. So it's a complicated mix of emotions. that I think, when I get home, you take some time to sit and think through and actually quite understand what you've seen, both from the end of what it's like for everyone here, but also the sort of spectacular scene of the eruption behind. So yeah, it's going to take a while for this to all sink in, really. And also I think, if my stargazing is not wrong, I think there is either Jupiter or Venus, one of them, is directly above.
I have to say, I'm not sure my iPhone is up to. You'll have that. You can see it there, and the volcanoes here. That's extraordinary.
Yeah. So someone with a very good camera could
Eduardo,
get some proper photos of that.
that would be amazing. That'd be amazing.
And something you can also see is the ends of the lava flow.
Yeah. So this is something somebody's asking about. So they're asking whether those are fires at the bottom here, but actually they're not fires, are they, Ryan?
No. Down there is a lava flow that's come from the vent that opened up yesterday, and that we've talked about a bit of how it's kind of sometimes been closed up and sometimes restarted. So that is sort of the lava flow coming down on top of the old one. And the reason why it's sort of in patches is because lava flows can create channels, and when you get channels you can get sort of steep sides that can block the view of the actual lava coming down, so you can get patches of where you can actually see it. So it's not fires, that is a lava flow, and then everything.
If I try to get that down there, can you just explain what's happening down here?
So what looks like street lights on the horizon is actually
these are orange street lights here.
Yeah, just in front.
But the ones behind, which are sort of a brighter orange.
Yes, that is actually the southern lava flow, the slower moving and larger lava flow from the main vent.
And how high is that roughly? Do we know in areas?
Oh, Ben, you have a figure?
Yeah, it's between 10 and 12 metres high,
Yeah.
so imagine as high as a double-decker bus,
Yeah.
really.
And below the front of that lava is more houses, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
So you've just got to think this volcano here. Let me see if I can get my finger in shot. This volcano here, we've got the lava coming behind his head here. That's the front here. And of course, between here and the sea, we've got more houses here.
It's quite interesting and sort of, can't really think of the right word to describe it, but like I said, it looks like street lights, but what would have been there before would have actually been street lights. So to actually, to have that sort of idea of, this lava flow has destroyed the houses that would have been there, and it almost looks like the thing that would have been there. So that's really difficult to sort of comprehend, and quite sad, really.
Terrible. Yes.
So yeah, you can only really see it properly like that at night, because you can see the glow from the edges, as the edges sort of are still hot and still move round. You can see the glow. Yeah, it's pretty sad seeing that.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, these even though we talk about the lava cooling, it can still keep its heat for a good few weeks. So I mean, people should not go anywhere near it.
No.
They should not try and step on it.
No,
they should not
definitely
try
not.
and collect it, even if they think or they've heard that it's cooling off. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's still a hazard.
Yeah, the only people that should be anywhere near that are those that are qualified and trained to be closer and are authorised to be closer,
And also have the right kit. Right?
and have the right equipment, the safety gear and everything, because they are slow moving. They can this one's probably around 400 meters a second.
No, 4 to 5 meters.
4 to 5
an
meters an hour. That's the
There
one.
you go.
Yeah, 4 to 5 meters an hour. I don't know what I was thinking of there. 4 to 5 meters an hour. So you wouldn't like get run over by one, but it doesn't mean they're not dangerous. So yeah, those, no one should be going near them,
Yeah.
and everyone should be staying away from that area.
Yeah.
I think Ben would like to. Do you want to come and thank you, Ryan? That was really interesting. Thank you for that. And we have a few comments of people saying thank you for the coverage. So well done, guys. You're doing really well. I'd just like to interject here very briefly while Ben gets into position to say these guys have had basically a month's worth of science communication training. And on a personal note, I just have to say I'm incredibly proud of them. These guys have been thrown in absolutely at the deep end. At an event where they're trying to report accurately and compassionately and make sure that we get the human story as well as the science story out, and it's not easy. It's really not easy. They're dealing with a new environment. They're dealing with having cameras put in their face, questions thrown at them, and they're doing incredibly well. So guys, I'm super proud of you. We definitely want to keep this going. So thank you, Ben. I think you wanted to add something at this point.
Yeah, so I was just going to expand on what Ryan said about the lava flows. I mean, obviously the outside of these flows cool, solidify extremely quickly, so that it looks like the whole thing's cooled, and people will step on them and everything. But actually, as you mentioned, Sharon, the middle of the lava flows, especially when they're thick, can take weeks or even months to cool, and are extremely dangerous because as well you get lava tubes forming where lava's been flowing sort of through the middle of a flow, even though the outsides have cooled, and especially when that drains, you get big voids or caves that can collapse at any time. And sort of another hazard from lava flow, yes, they're not very fast moving, but also they sort of emit a lot of gases, especially when they're cooling. In fact,
sorry, could you repeat that? They emit gases when they're cooling. That's the first time I've heard that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so it's just as the blocks sort of cool, especially closer to the vent, it can sort of release a lot of steam and other gases. And I think I'm right in saying that the only fatalities in the 1971 eruptions here were from people trying to take photographs of the lava and of the volcanoes, and they didn't actually die from being hit by a bomb, being hit by a lava flow. They died because of inhaling the gases. So that's just sort of a testament to sort of how dangerous it is. So just to reiterate, obviously you shouldn't go anywhere near these unless you're a qualified scientist, you have all the right gear, you've got taken all the right precautions, and above all else you have a reason to be there.
To put that into context, those gases are dangerous, but in high concentrations if you're close to it. If you're a safe distance away, I think, and particularly being right by the sea, again, I'm speaking as a non-scientist, I'm asking the question because I want people to know, we can ask all of these questions and these guys can put us straight. But my assumption is as long as you're a safe distance away, that is not such a hazard. It's just if you're very close up to it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's sorts of quantities of sulfur, I guess, is the main gas in the plume, and the main gas sort of that gets degassed out of the magma, is water vapor, which is fine. The sort of next most prominent gas is probably sulfur dioxide, which goes up in the plume and can be measured, but thankfully that diffuses sort of high in the atmosphere, and will never cause a sort of local issue. And sort of the same with the ash. I've seen a few questions about the pollution or toxicity of the ash. but regardless of where sort of ash is falling in general, and I think this has been a message put out today by the authorities. The air quality remains good, and there shouldn't be any sort of pollutants or any toxic gases to worry about. Although what I would say is, like we've had to be doing, if you're in an area where there is ashfall, then you need a good grade face mask. We've been wearing FFP2s and also goggles to protect your eyes from the ash.
Thank you, Ben. That's a perfect summary on that front. Thank you very much. We're joined by Canchelos, Julio. Hola, ¿qué tal? Saludos desde La Palma. He has a lovely message here saying mucha fuerza para toda la gente de La Palma. Sí, señor. Absolutely. And actually we have been interviewing, we're running a series called Volcano Stories, which we're going to run together, working together as a team, documenting the experiences of all sorts of people from the Red Cross to people on the front line who are working, TV presenters, national news TV presenters to cameramen, and we will continue doing that as we're here. And the one message that they all seem to come together on is to say, please, mucho ánimo a los de La Palma, sigan muy fuertes y adelante para el futuro. We really don't want this story to be forgotten, and we want people to remain very aware of the consequences of what's going on here. And in fact, it's followed up by a very nice message. Good evening, thank you for your job. Can you give some information on how we can donate for the people who have lost their homes? That's a fantastic point. Thank you very much. There's lots of initiatives that are starting up. And guys, as we're here, perhaps we could make a thread for people to know where they can donate, how they can help, because there's been an outpouring of solidarity here, which is fantastic. But I think now they're getting a little bit more organized in terms of how they're raising funds, and they're really identifying the best things that we can do and what we can need. So perhaps we'll spend a bit of time putting that together, and we'll put it out on our social media channels. Maybe, Rosie, I could ask you for tomorrow, you could do an update on that as well, so that we can make sure that anybody who would like to donate, particularly for people who've lost their homes, their livelihoods. Some people had, as we said yesterday, 15 minutes to get out of their homes. And I mean, what do you save in 15 minutes? Do you try and find the paperwork to show that you are owner of this house? Do you, so that you can then prove that this was your house? Here papers still matter. And if they're lost under a lava flow, what happens then? In the UK, I think we're very lucky. Most things are digitized now. But here, there are still a lot of people who may not have the correct paperwork for their homes. And that's a question as well. I think that it'd be worth asking tomorrow, as we're out and about and reporting on tomorrow, saying, what sort of burden of proof will there be on people if they're trying to claim and get help? Because people need help quickly. It's not something we can afford to let lots of time go by and say, next month or next week, or bring me another piece of paper. These are people who have had their livelihoods swallowed, right? And we've got to have a look and see what's happening there, and see if we can shine a light on that situation as well, because honestly I don't know the answer to that, and I think we need to find out. Hello Clem, you're asking, some people were saying to wear masks against the gases coming from the eruption. Would it actually be useful? So we were using FFP2 masks most of the time, but I have to say we're not wearing them during the transmission, but we have been advised to use them. I've seen all the sort of technical information they've given to all the local and national media here, and they're being advised to wear masks and these glasses. Do these FFP2 masks make much of a difference, Ben, in terms of the gases, do we know, or is it mainly to stop us inhaling too much ash?
They're mainly for the ash, yes. The sort of particles of the gases are sort of too small to be affected by the masks. It's similar, to the arguments of, if you wear a mask to protect yourself against COVID, you're taking less oxygen, which of course is not true. It's the same logic as that. In fact, I was in having a webinar on the eruption in Iceland, and sort of someone, you know, they sort of have problems with the sulfur emissions. They're the sulfur dioxide emissions, and sort of someone asked the question there, well, everyone's wearing masks because of COVID, will that lessen the impacts of the gases? And the answer was no, they would not, because the particles were too small. But I mean, here to reiterate,
Yes,
the air
please, if
quality
you would.
remains
Yes.
good, you know, everywhere. You know, the sulfur emissions are quite low, they're diffuse, they're high in the atmosphere. You know, it's nothing to worry about here.
So to reiterate, this volcano is erupting on an open flank, so with right next to the sea, so a high dispersal rate, and the only time those gases would actually prove a problem to health is if you were very close to the volcano,
Yeah.
and anybody getting very close to the volcano should have all the proper equipment.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
more the ash, isn't it, that
Yeah,
we're talking about?
yeah.
And the ash, you know, you think of ash coming off a bonfire, which is quite benign, you sort of brush it off, but the ash here is basically little tiny glass crystals, correct?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's fine when it's on the ground. You can sort of run your hands through it. You know, it's just like sand. And I mean, a lot of the beaches, well, all the beaches here should be black sand, unless the sand's been imported from elsewhere. But yeah, especially you know, in the areas of heavy ashfall where the ashfall particles are maybe slightly bigger, you know, you do feel it. And if you don't have goggles, you know, your eyes very quickly, you know, start to sting. You know, it's almost like a hail that sort of doesn't sort of brush off you or stay away. It does sort of get everywhere, and it is quite unpleasant if you don't have the right equipment. So yeah, to reiterate, yeah, goggles and a good grade face mask will, you know, and long sleeves if you can will protect you against, you know, the majority of the sort of harm from the ash.
Fantastic. There's a question here from Connor 10654. Hello again, Connor. If there's tremors around the volcano, doesn't it mean that magma is moving upwards, meaning the eruption isn't done? So I think perhaps what we need to differentiate here, again as a non-scientist, but I guess is between tremor, but what we were feeling yesterday wasn't tremors, was it? It was little seismic movements. So maybe if you could just tell us the difference, so that we can explain what the difference is there for people.
Yeah, so you're exactly right that yeah, that's what seismic tremor is. Yeah, seismic tremor is when the magma's sort of moving below the system, generally moving upwards. Yes, that was different to sort of what we were feeling yesterday, which was, you know, mostly size wave, you know, mostly sort of sound waves and little sort of reverberations. And yes, in fact, you know, the seismic tremor, you know, is changing in certain frequencies. It did decrease yesterday, but you know, there's, you know, a lot of seismic tremor is still being recorded. You know, which you know, is in keeping with what we're seeing, which is the eruption is ongoing.
Thank you, Ben. Rosie, I think you had a question. Would you like to read it out to Ben? Ben, I think we'd like you to answer it, but maybe if Rosie wouldn't mind reading it out, so I don't have to grab the phone off you. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's a question that I got via Twitter. So could you explain why no one seems worried about a 2010 Iceland-style ash cloud? Is this a different sort of eruption or a different sort of airflow pattern?
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you for the question, guys.
Yeah, so the main difference between here and the eruption in 2010 in Iceland is the eruption style. So yes, the volcanoes are both sort of hotspot volcanoes. They're both basaltic in composition, but the big sort of problem in Iceland is that the volcano was subglacial, so it had a glacier atop of it. And what that does is it means when sort of the magma reaches the surface, when the ground heats up, you know, the glacier melts, and the water interacts with the magma, and when that happens, the water vaporizes very quickly, very sort of explosively, and when, you know, it's called a hydrovolcanic interaction. When there is a hydrovolcanic interaction, as I said, it's very explosive, and this acts to fragment the magma more than we see here, because it's less explosive, you know, into very small ash-sized particles. So that's why in the Iceland eruption it produced, you know, a very vast quantity of very fine ash, which was very sort of easily distributed. The direction of the winds didn't help in Iceland's case, but in this case, you know, not enough ash is being produced for the sort of cloud to have, you know, a really profound distal effect. I think the furthest place it's affected at the minute is maybe sort of southern Tenerife, which is maybe 120 kilometres away. But yeah, it would be very surprising if the ash caused significant disruptions further away than that.
Thank you, Ben. Of course, to reiterate, the airport has been closed here because of the ash, but just very locally in La Palma. I haven't looked, I can't remember exactly how far the airport is from where we are, but we're certainly talking, what, no more than 20-30 kilometres away.
No, yeah, and in fact, as of late this morning, the airport has managed to reopen. They've had sort of a 24-hour long cleanup of the ash on the runway. You know, I don't think the airport is getting constant ashfall. I think for a couple of days at the end of last week, the eruption was pretty intense, and the wind direction was preferential to deposit sort of in that area of the island.
Ben, that's great. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. It's been a somber day. It's been a day of reflection, a day of heightened emotion, a day of hearing stories and testimony from so many different quarters, and certainly a day to reevaluate, to refocus, to think about why we're here and the best job that we can do to make sure that our contribution here always stays positive. So thank you for your questions. We'll try to connect live tomorrow, and I'll just leave you with a few minutes so that you can just hear the volcano and have a sense of what we're living through here. Good night, everybody. Thank you.